Haruna smiled as she watched Yamato fly away. She didn't want him to worry. She wanted him to fight without fear. When she had taken Miro's attack to protect Yamato, she had realized the end was near. Even with the power of the Stryker system, there was no way her slender body could withstand Miro's relentless attacks.
絶対に大丈夫。ヤマト君は正義の味方なんだもん。
The accumulated damage had taken what time still remained to her. And when she gave up Taizan to Yamato, she had known. She was out of time.
もっとお話ししたかったな。
She looked up at Yamato, who shone like a star up in the sky. Her tears streamed down her smiling cheeks.
学校が終わってからの喫茶店。そこにはいつもヤマト君がいるの。今日は学校でこんなことがあったね。ヤマト君は先生に質問されてトンチンカンな答えを返して叱られていたね。
Still smiling, Haruna began to fade.
めんどくさそうにしながらヤマト君はいつも笑ってる。週末はお金もないのにデートして結局いつもの喫茶店で夕方までおしゃべりするの。 本当はね、本当は一緒にそんなことをしてみたかったな。
Huh. She really disappeared. That's kind of sad. I wonder if there's a way to bring her back. Haruna watched her hero marching into the fight, then her body faded into the ether. All that remained were her tears on the ground. Meanwhile, Roger's and Miro's duel was coming to a close.
この野郎、人の技を真似しやがって。どうだ、自分の技で殺される気分は。
The twin sets of swords clashed together, ringing out through the night sky. But it was clear that Roger's sword couldn't measure up to Miro's in power. Even as the two clashed, he found himself driven back.
バカめ、お前の技は見切ったと言っただろうが。
Miro knocked Roger's sword from his hand, then charged in to run him through. But Rogers didn't dodge. Instead, he flew straight at Miro unarmed. What? Why did he do that? The seven swords scored Rogers' body.
素手で何ができる？自殺でもしたいのか？
Miro sneered at him, then brought his hand down, as casually as if he were swatting a fly. The next moment there was the sound of steel tearing through flesh. Miro's fingers flew through the air. What? At some point, an eighth sword had appeared in Roger's hand.
俺の剣が全部で7本だなんて誰が言ったよ。嘘だ。僕がこんな雑魚に。
Miro stood, looking dumbfounded at the stumps of his severed fingers.
指がちぎれたぐらいでギャーギャーうるせえんだよ。
Roger scolded and spat away his cigarette. He was smoking the whole time. The tip of it touched his blade. Oh, the edge of the blade was wreathed in a sudden flame. Rogers held it aloft.
よくも僕の指を。
Miro thrust both hands toward Rogers. In that moment, the seven swords sank deeper into Rogers' body. A geyser of blood erupted, flesh went flying, but nevertheless, Rogers swung his flaming sword. The two forms passed each other in the air. This time it was Mirror's right arm that went flying. His entire body skewered, bleeding from numerous cuts, Rogers began plummeting to earth. On his face was an expression of contentment. As he plummeted towards the earth, the light of his body suddenly dimmed. Suddenly he was gone, as if he'd never been there at all. Only a faint glow like that of a firefly spiraled through the air below. That light soon vanished too, and the last trace of Rogers' existence was snuffed from the world. Mirror howled as he pressed his hand up against his severed arm. His maturity had regressed to a grade schooler's level. He didn't know how to deal with such baby. Even in his agony, though, the image of Rogers' disappearance was burned into his mind. Something had penetrated the armor over his heart. The fear of death began to overtake him. With no one to sustain it, Mirror's ball of energy burst outward. Yamato's vision went white. Within the blinding radiance, he heard the memory collector's soft words. Seeing the flickering light above, Jack broke off his attack. The baboon cyborg sat down in exhaustion. Her comrades Orson and Joseph were already gone. They had vanished during the duel with Jack. Murray bowed her head, preparing for her execution. After a moment's consideration, Jack shook his head and sheathed his blade. Jack turned his back on her, then vanished. Meanwhile, elsewhere in town, a little girl pulled herself from the rubble of a building. It was the girl Duran saved just before he disappeared. As the girl tried to catch her breath, a shining light in the skies caught her attention. She watched the aurora for a moment, then remembered the man who had saved her. She looked around and called out, but no one was there. Oh, Rin is still here too, huh? Meanwhile, Rin watched Mira's defeat from the town below. Even after the brilliant light had faded, her eyes remained focused on the sky. Solidity had returned to her body. Tears ran ceaselessly down her cheeks. Rin had wandered the town looking for Mira, but all she had seen was the disappearance of her beloved comrades. No one answered her calls through her transmitter. Rin was at a total loss. She couldn't do more than stand there. A feeling of total loneliness, uncertainty about the future, sadness about the loss of her friends, cut cruelly through her bosom. A sudden voice caught Rin's attention. She looked up to see Sayaka waving and running to her.
やっぱりリンだったんだね。避難の途中で見かけて、まさかと思って追いかけてきたんだよ。さやかさん、どうしたのその怪我。一人みたいだけど、アパートの他の連中は？
She buried her face in Sayaka's chest and cried her heart out. Sayaka, unsure of what to say, merely hugged her tight.
何も心配しなくていいよ。リンには友達がいるんだからさ。
At last, the light was gone, leaving behind the faint purple of a dawning sky. It was the sign that Dengeki Stryker's battle was over. One week later, Yuki, Daisuke, and Hiromi were still staying in Yamato's apartment.
なあ、なんで俺たちあいつの下宿なんかに来ているんだっけ？
ヤマトが心配だから上京しようってあなたから言ったんでしょ？
確かにそんな気もするが。
Daisuke looked down at the city through the window, scratching his head. The town was still recovering from the mirror incident, the scars of battle yet unhealed.
それにしてもひどいありさまだな。いいタイミングで上京できたとも言えるが。
本当にそうね。あの晩は本当にひどい騒ぎだったんだから。
テロリストによる連続爆破だっけ？まったく世の中も物騒になったもんだな。
Daisuke didn't remember a thing about Dengeki Stryker. It wasn't just his own story, he had forgotten that his son was Stryker, as well as everything about the duel that had unfolded. He didn't even realize that Rin, the new waitress at Cafe Ichimonji, was a character that he had created. It wasn't just Daisuke though, the memory of the Baborn cyborgs had been completely erased from everyone's memory. Only those deeply involved in the incident, like Yamato, Hiromi, and Jack, had any memory of the situation.
なあ、前から気になっていたんだが、この漫画の束ってヤマトが描いたものなのか？
やっぱり忘れているのね。それはあなたが書いた最高傑作よ。
俺には全く覚えがないがな。
Daisuke flipped hastily through the scripts. He was instantly intrigued and began reading it avidly.
へえ、すっげえ面白いじゃねえか。本当に俺こんな漫画を描いてたのか？
え？そうよ。
まあ確かに俺が描きそうな話ではあるんだが。 ところでヤマトはどうしたんだ？
相変わらずあの子はほうけてるわよ。今日も例の場所でぼんやりしてるんじゃないかしら。
ま、何があったか知らないが、そのうち元気になるだろう。子供は親が口出ししなくても勝手に成長するもんだ。なんだよこの漫画、ここで終わりなのかよ。
ええ、あなたはその漫画の結末を書かなかったのよ。
だったら今からでもこの続きでも書いてみようかな。
The sky was blue, white clouds drifted by. As usual, I was sitting by the river, just looking out over it. How many days had it been? I'd grown sick of counting.
親方様、そろそろパトロールにでも。
行かない。
では、テレビで情報収集などを。
しない。
The battle had ended, but all that remained for me now was a lifetime without Haruna. I hadn't made it in time, after all my boasting that I wouldn't let her disappear. I remembered the moment she had given me a taizan, the tears she had cried then. Maybe that had been her way of saying goodbye. I had been fighting to save Haruna, to stop her from disappearing. I was Haruna.
ヤマト君には指一本触れさせないんだから。
Even after the incredible hit she had taken, she refused to give a single step.
春菜。
もう長話をしている時間はないわ。ヤマト君、これをセットして。
If she hadn't come, I surely would have died. Even though I had promised to protect her. Even though I had wanted to be her hero.
すごい。これって一体どんな手品なの？
ああ、ジャックのやつが忍術とやらでカモフラージュしておいてくれたらしい。
そうなんだ。うわー、きれい。
I thought back on the class party we had planned together. Haruna had been so shocked by the sight. She was so lovely. Yes, she really had been lovely. I could say it now. I realized it now. I had spent so much time thinking about Haruna. I drew my knees to my chest and buried my face in them. The skies and the clouds had no interest for me now. I was a husk, the husk of Yuki Yamato, the man who had tried to play hero.
まだ春菜殿のことを悔やんでおられるのでござるか？
俺は約束したんだ。命に変えても春菜を助けるって。
We'd had this conversation many times. Jack had remained loyally by my side, trying to encourage me. But
でも結局俺は春菜を助けることができなかった。
in the end, I had only my regrets.
親方様。
だから俺は電撃ストライカーだったことを全て忘れる。俺には正義のヒーローの資格なんてなかったんだ。お前もとっととアメリカに帰れよ。俺になんかくっついていても何の意味もないぞ。
いいな、そんなことはござらぬ。親方様はここで終わるお方ではないでござるよ。きっと親方様には休息が必要なのでござる。疲れが癒えるまでの間は拙者が頑張るでござるよ。そんなわけで拙者は町内パトロールに出かけるでござるよ。
As usual, he wasn't about to listen to me. Having said what he wanted to say, Jack disappeared on the wind, leaving me behind on my own. I closed my eyes. Once more I called up my memories of Haruna. Just then...
Yeah.
Why is he here? Suddenly there was an intrusive voice behind me.
君のおかげで無事記憶が回収できました。改めてお疲れ様でした。
うせろよ。
I continued looking at the river, ignoring the voice. Today in the park, the children were playing superhero. One was wearing a scarf. On his arms were striker units made from cardboard. It was ironic. The battle had caused a new boom in Dengeki Stryker's popularity. All the children were playing striker.
悪人どもめ、覚悟しろ。
くだらない遊びをしやがって。将来ろくな大人にならねえぞ。
I spat out the self-deprecating words. Right, becoming a superhero didn't solve anything. They should learn from my example. Just then...
そんなことないよ。
What? I thought she disappeared. Why is she here? I hear Taruna's voice in my ear. Obviously, it couldn't be her real voice. I had heard it many times before, Haruna's voice, almost as if she were right beside me. It was just a hallucination of my lonely heart. Anytime I heard that voice, I would wander around town looking for her. Obviously, I never found her. It was just the memory collector playing another rotten trick.
あなただってストライカーが大好きなんでしょ？
Even so, I couldn't stop myself from replying.
ストライカーなんか大嫌いだ。あいつは何も守れなかった情けない男なんだぞ。
そんなことはないよ。ストライカーは人知れずこの町を守ってくれたんだよ。
でも大好きだった女を、春菜を守ってあげられなかった。思い出はこれから作ればいいなんて言っておいて、俺はそんなささやかな約束すら守れなかったんだ。
ヤマト君はちゃんと私を守ってくれたじゃない。
Just then, I felt a soft hand on my shoulder.
もし忘れてしまっているなら私が思い出させてあげるよ。
Did the memory collector bring her back? I let out a soft cry and turned. Before my eyes was the girl I thought had vanished forever.
ヤマト君、
まさかそんな。
A dream? A mirage? I stood there in a daze. The memory collector's voice sounded in my ears.
ああ、なんと言いますか。今回の件については私も思い出を落としてしまった責任がありますから、特別に少しおまけをつけておきました。ほら、私もサービス業ですから。
How nice of him.
じゃあまさか本当に。
ただいま、ヤマト君。私の電撃ストライカーさ。
Haruna smiled at me.
春菜。
I moved unthinkingly to my feet. I hugged the beautiful girl with all the strength I had. She was so warm and so soft. I had to make sure she was really real.
春菜、春菜。
I lifted Haruna up and spun her round and around.
どうしたの？ヤマト君、泣いてるよ。
泣いてない。俺はヒーローだからな。ヒーローは泣かないんだ。
As I spoke, I gently led her back onto the ground. Just as Haruna said, there were hot tears rolling down my cheeks, but somehow I didn't mind.
これからずっと一緒に思い出を作っていこうね。
はあ、もちろんだ。
Haruna blushed and hugged me tightly. I deeply inhaled her fragrance. Our eyes met and we kissed.
大好き、ヤマト君。
As if to celebrate our embrace forever, a late rain of cherry blossoms blew past on the wind. Is this the end? Feels like it's the end. Yeah, it totally is the end. It seems like we finished Haruna's route of Dengeki, Cho Dengeki Stryker. Well, I have to say, it was quite an entertaining read. I mean, the story wasn't overly complex or anything. It was, well, it was a typical shonen story, I would say. But for what it was pretty entertaining. I will probably take a break from Cho Dengeki Stryker for now. But I will probably come back to it one day in the future and do one of the other routes. Anyway, thanks for watching this playthrough, and until the next video, whatever it might be, bye bye.